Well, if you have a question, I'm going to try to get to a couple of questions, but you can use the Slido that you downloaded before, just put in question, and we're going to try to get to some of those questions. I want to start, now this is a little odd that Ken is to my right. To my far right, I'm going to go to Ken Blackwell, because Ken, former Secretary of State of Ohio, he was Secretary of State of Ohio, which was over elections back in 2000. So he's had a little history with controversial and close elections. But a lot of people are saying, in fact, before we leave here tonight, we've got two candidates here, one Congresswoman, we've got Scott here who's running, that these elections are still being counted. People saying this, in the age of computers, in the age of technology, why are we waiting days and weeks to get the outcomes of election? Ken Blackwell, that is your question tonight.
Well, Tony, as you know, I've traveled the globe looking at how elections are managed. I am co-chairman of the International Foundation for Electoral Systems, which is funded primarily by the U.S. Agency for International Development.
So you go all over the world to oversee election systems and monitor.
Absolutely. And so let me first start off by saying that there is not another developed country in the world, therefore there is not another country in the world that uses vote by mail as extensively as we do here in the United States.
You mean people actually have to show up in those other countries and vote?
Absolutely. Now, one of the reasons for that is that by its own admission, the U.S. Postal Service loses about 3% of the mail. Therefore, it sounds to me a little crazy to, in fact, take a voting system and put it into a structure or a system that has a 3% chance of the mail not getting back. So, in this country, state legislatures have the right to, or the responsibility to determine the time, place, and manner of elections. It is part of the decentralization of our system, which does two things. It keeps us moving away from a centralized government, and two, it makes sure that our lock is hard to pick because you have 50 different systems. Mm-hmm. What we have now is a system that is moving in the wrong direction. We have a system that doesn't take place on an election day, but an election month. That has a major impact on the chain of custody of ballots. When you vote in a precinct at the local level, not too many hands touch your ballot after you put it in the box and it is counted. When you have an election month, you have a ballot security problem. When you vote by mail, you have more hands touching your ballot than is necessary or prudent. So I think our system needs to do a couple of things. One, we need to move back to election day. Two, we need to put in place systems that guarantee that you can validate that a voter is who he or she claims to be. And three, we in fact need to get back to a system like almost every other country where in fact you know the results within 24 hours of the election day.
So is it accurate to say a big challenge in counting these ballots is that we have taken and expanded, as you said, from a day to a month, and these states like Idaho, Washington State,
Oregon,
Washington State that had vote by mail, it took them 10 years to make that transition. Yeah. And we've done that just in an election cycle, and the infrastructure is not there to count ballots the way we're counting them now. And that's one of the reasons this thing is running so long.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Look, at the turn of the industrial age, we had what was called Luddites, folks who just destroyed the new machinery that was put in place because they didn't trust it or they found it threatening to their way of life. I'm afraid to say that in the 21st century, I'm probably a 21st century Luddite when it comes to voting machines. I really don't know why we would move away from paper ballots and, in fact, counting those paper ballots at a very decentralized system and turning it into the reporting system of a Secretary of State. Those are some basic things that we need to do in order to get back on track and rebuild confidence of results. Right now, there is almost no confidence in the results that we are getting because it's taking us too long to count ballots, and it's taking us too long to, in fact, give people a sense of confidence that this system is authentic and true.
So that's something state legislatures have the right to do and responsibility to do. So we've seen changes in the last 2 years. Hopefully we'll see even more in the next 2 years going into 2024. Michele, I want to switch gears a little bit, not so much focusing on this election, but focusing on the state of our nation. From your perspective, I mean, you started out an education issue in Minnesota. You were in the Minnesota legislature. You were a senator. You ran with the marriage amendment there. You came to Congress, led out all the conservative issues. You fought Obamacare. You had the House call, the big rally on the steps of the Capitol, ran for president of the United States, a Republican nomination. Many Christians don't understand the level of spiritual warfare that's taking place in our nation. That what we see on the news, the headlines, is not even half the issue. And if we allow the left to force us to drop our Christian faith, to disarm, we don't have a chance. What do we need to do?
Well, I wanted to stand up just because I can't see a lot of people over there because of the podium. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to go ahead and stand up. What do we do? It's clear what we have to do. We have to understand the Word. We have to elevate the Word of God in the United States. And then we need to follow His ways. That's simple, but that's what we have to do. We have to elevate His Word, and we have to follow His Word. And when we do that, God is no respecter of people. He's no respecter of nations. When we do that, then His hand of blessing comes upon the nation. We receive His grace, we receive His mercy, and we have His hand of favor. But we're just like other nations. When we say thanks but no thanks, we're going to do it our way, then He leaves us to our own devices, and then judgment comes. And I think we've had that sense that judgment has been coming on the nation. Can I weigh in on this election anyway, though?
You can.
Okay.
You're the chairman of the board. You can.
That's
do
true.
whatever
I'm
you
your
want.
boss.
That's
That's
right.
true. That's true. No, I tell you, Ed, the way I look at it is this. 2 years ago, we were incredulous and led to believe that Joe Biden got more votes than any other president ever in the history of man, 81 million votes, sitting in his basement. One of his last rallies was St. Paul, Minnesota, at the fairgrounds, where they drew 12 circles, and that's who showed up to hear him. And then he went on in a couple days to get 81 million votes, and to 75 million for the sitting President Trump, who had more votes than any other prior incumbent president. And we're supposed to believe this. And if anybody questioned it, you were bludgeoned from Twitter, Facebook, any social media, thrown off. People were thrown out of work. And we were all told while we were beaten with a stick, don't ever question the election results. You can't question it. You can't say anything. And so for 2 years, we've been called pejorative names like election denier or whatever. And then you look at the last 21 months. In my lifetime, these have been the most difficult 21 months that the nation has gone through, from policy So we're supposed to believe that Joe Biden is the most popular president we've ever seen in the United States of America. This is just my opinion, not FRC's. So we're supposed to believe he's the most important president, most popular. And now when you, at a midterm, when a president normally lose seats anyway, it's going to happen. Obama was actually popular. He was slaughtered in the midterms. Clinton was popular. They were slaughtered in the midterms. Biden comes along, who apparently is supposed to be popular, even though his approval rating was 28%. And so in the midterms, with this agenda where what's he saying in the last couple of weeks? Oh, I'm going to stop drilling. I'm going to shut down coal plants. Half of the country, you guys are fascists. This is how he ran it, and the big thing was, if you don't vote for me, you're killing democracy. That's your closing argument, and we're supposed to believe that that crushed people from going to the polls. So in 2020, we're supposed to believe that that election result was no problem. That's exactly what it was. Now we're supposed to believe this year, same thing, twice in a row. And so if you look at all the commentary that's out on TV, the premise is the results are accurate. And I just want to say, I don't believe it. This is just my opinion. I don't think the results are accurate. And so what are we spending all day doing today and yesterday? Republicans are fighting with themselves. We're fighting. This thing, again, think what you want, but now we're fighting. And what's the fight? We're supposed to believe that when people went into that voting booth, they weren't thinking about Joe Biden. They weren't thinking about Joe Biden's policies or what their life is like under these policies. Oh no, they're thinking about Donald Trump. That's what they're thinking about. That's what we're told we're supposed to believe. And they were rejecting Donald Trump. This whole election was so the American people could reject Donald Trump. That's on the Los Angeles Times today. That's one of the headlines. And the other one is everybody wants abortion so much that they're willing to look the other way on every other issue to make sure they have abortion. I'm just saying it's a crock, and we're told to repeat lies. So we've been swimming in lies the last 3 years. And what they've done in 3 years is say, here's a box, get in it. You're a captive. You stay in this box. And this election result on Tuesday night was to say resistance is futile. That's what it is. Resistance is futile. Don't try to push back. And I think, where's the Republican leadership been? And when is the Republican leadership going to say, we're not putting up with elections that aren't transparent? You had a Republican leader here that demanded transparent elections in Ohio. Look how Ohio went on Tuesday night. So when you have Republican leaders who say, we're not going to play by these phony rules and phony machines anymore, we're going to demand genuine transparency so that when we go in and $16.7 billion is spent on election, you're at least going to get a result that's decent, and you're going to get it in 24 hours. So I say we stop buying this phony premise that everything was accurate. So now we have to think about who's going to be president in 24. No, why is there a 24 if 20 and 22 were results that we're supposed to accept face value? There you have it.
Michele Bachmann for president.
That was 2012.
You know, the next campaign message should be just like Domino's, 20 minutes or it's free. We need these election results in 24 hours or it's over.
Tony, Michelle, that was inspirational. But you put me
That's how I dealt with 28 kids.
No, you actually,
I would stand in line. I wouldn't move.
you reminded me of something that was said by Frederick Douglass and my father. First by Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass said, great abolitionist, he said, those who are whooped easiest are whooped most often. And we're going to take a stand. Yeah. We're not going to be whooped. But my dad used to say, he was a great guy in terms of time management. He said, bees don't waste much time trying to convince flies that honey is better than puppy poop. We don't have any more time to spend trying to convince idiots on the left that America is not stuck in 1619, but something dramatic happened in this country in 1776, and we are determined to make sure that we preserve this notion that God is at the center of the nation. Individual freedom is primary, and the family is the incubator of liberty, and we're not going to let folks destroy it.
That's right. That's right. Ken Blackwell for president.
The scripture, and Michelle, you said we need to elevate the word. And that's one of the reasons the Family Research Council, about 3 years ago, we started on a journey through the Bible. We do it every 2 years. How many of you are with us on this journey through the Bible? Any of them? Yeah, I see several hands out here. We're doing this. In fact, I invite you to join me every morning. I do a 10-minute devotional on Facebook and at tonyperkins.com based upon that journey. And some people say, why is a policy group in Washington, D.C. focused on the Word? Well, I would tell you, it's alarming when the American Bible Society just recently released their annual report, and one of the findings was the number of Christians that read the Bible every day. Only 10% of Christians in America read the Bible every day. Well, I'm one of those 10%. Well, I am thankful for you. And I bet we probably defy the percentages here in this room, but here's the reason is that we have to have a foundation to stand on. Because the days coming ahead are going to be very difficult, very challenging. But Jesus said that we are to occupy until he comes.
Amen. Amen.
He didn't call us necessarily to victory in this life. He called us to obedience, but victory is coming. Victory is coming. And we practice what we preach at the Family Research Council every morning. We have a meeting at 9 o'clock of all of our team. Those that are there in D.C. join in the conference room. Those across the country join by phone. And we start by going through that daily reading. And everyone has a chance to share. We have probably a dozen ordained ministers on our staff in various capacities. Our younger staff, they're getting a seminary degree every morning as we talk through this. But you know what? We have a great time in Washington, D.C. dealing with these issues. We have joy, we have peace, we have confidence. Tuesday night was our expectations were a little higher. But you know what? We got up Wednesday morning, we came back, and we were right back at our post because we know that God is at work. Now, we do not use that as an excuse to absolve ourselves of our responsibility. All of us have a place on the wall. And I made this point earlier with Secretary Pompeo, and I want to kind of conclude our time because I want to pray before we leave. Every election, you hear this, they're all important. This is the most important election. Have you heard that before? Well, you know what is true? This election was the most important election. The next election is going to be the most important election. Because elections, they're really not about personality or even politics or party anymore. It's about whose worldview is going to dominate. It's about whose worldview will shape the policies that guide and direct what your children are learning and the world in which they're going to grow up in. And so when some of us don't show up, guess what? We all pay the price. Because the other worldview, which is diametrically opposed to a biblical worldview, will shape the policies. So we cannot afford to back up, to go silent, to be discouraged. We've got to stay engaged with a sense of eternal hope, knowing that what we do in this life will echo into eternity. And that is our commitment at the Family Research Council, to have that eternal view of God's plan, and that He has enabled us and given us the opportunity to be a part of it.
Tony, let me just, because I know you're going to pray, but let me say to the assembled here that there's nothing more powerful than personal example. And for all the years that I've known you, and for the 15 years or so that I've worked at FRC, it has been the fact that you get up every day and you strive for moral coherence. You try to make sure that your behavior matches what you profess to believe. And it is that example that you provide that gives power to your leadership. And we've been blessed for 20 years to have you stay with us, to be that powerful example. It is your your daily striving for moral coherence, and your personal example that gives depth to the meaning and purpose of FRC.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you.